Hello, everybody. This is a message to the West. In light of recent events, there's something that we have to realize. The realization that we have to come to is that leftists, progressives, and many casual liberals, everyday normies, actually believe what they say they believe. They said we live in an oppressive white supremacist patriarchy. They said the system of your country is designed to disadvantage minorities, women, black people, homosexuals, and trans people. They said, if you're not actively dismantling, deconstructing the system, the culture of the majority, you are perpetuating a system that works against minorities and everyone who is not white or white male. They said, this leads to the killing of black people and other minorities by the police, the killing of trans people, the killing and raping of women. They said that even your silence is violence, since it perpetuates a system of oppression. They said making jokes, making so-called microaggression, harm people, lead to violence, to self-harm. It normalizes hatred and also perpetuates systems of oppression. They said your advocacy for the sovereignty of your state, the conservation of your culture, the celebration of your culture and your values are excluding other groups of people and harming them. They said culture and politics are a zero-sum game. They said you can never understand minorities, people on the fringe, people that do not have the power since they aren't the majority, aren't white, aren't male. And the only thing that you can do is shut up and move out of the way and let others control the system. Control society, control the culture, control your workplace, control every institution, because as a white person who can never understand others and who can only act in your own interest, you will always be oppressive. The majority always holds more power, and since the majority can never understand others, the white majority can only be fascist, white supremacist by default. Even when they try to dismantle their whiteness, they will be pretentious white saviors that will still patronize minorities. There's no way for you not to be fascist or white supremacist. They said, since you have the power merely by being white, people cannot be racist against you, no matter what they do. They excused every harm done to you and people like you as a result of socioeconomic factors that your ancestors created and that you perpetuate. It's all your fault. You are an oppressor and you can hurt your oppressor, right? They said it's payback time. They said you deserve it. They see you as evil for being white and for wanting your culture and your people to exist and be protected from harm. They think that as a white person, as a Westerner, you have the duty to serve brown people, serve minorities all over the world. You have no claim to land, no claim to your country, no claim to your culture. No, your land was stolen. Your country is just imaginary lines on a map, and your culture does not exist or was stolen as well. Brown people are victims. They are noble, with beautiful cultures and beliefs, but everything about you is backwards and disgusting. Palestinians have a right to their land. But Brits, Germans, Swedes, they don't. Your values are outdated and your love for your nation, your appreciation for your nationals, for your tribe, your faith, your culture, your history, your values, your identity, and the desire to keep it is toxic and outright evil, since keeping your culture, keeping your identity as a nation, as a majority in your country, means that some people, some cultural practices do not have a place in it. They do not align with it. They do not fit in and cannot be seen as equal or celebrated or be represented equally, which is not inclusive, which is not putting diversity and tolerance at the pinnacle of your value hierarchy, which again is seen as white supremacy and the oppression of black people and other minorities. They said no one is illegal, so everyone has a claim to your country. And illegals should get free healthcare, should get financial support, should be able to vote. We need to help poor people around the world. So they have endless empathy for foreigners, but none for their own nationals. They see you as inhumane because you see limitations to the help your country can provide to foreigners. They see you as inhumane because you want to help your nationals first, that you want the money you and your fellow countrymen and their ancestors paid into the system benefit them and their children. There shouldn't be a world where people in other countries have it worse and where you have it better. Diversity is our strength. Inclusivity will make us better, enrich us, but even if it isn't, it is only the right thing to do to open the borders and let people in who have it worse. You not wanting that is not because you want to protect yourself, but because you want others to suffer, or you simply do not care. In any case, you are evil. Also, your country, your peace, your wealth is stolen anyway. Stolen from other countries, a product of slave labor. So, you have no right to it anyway. There's nothing that you can do but resent your nation, your culture, your race, your ethnicity, your faith, and endlessly apologize for existing. Apologize for your ancestors and try to make amends for past injustice. Things your ancestors did, or people in the past who just looked like you. Whoever criticized your country, its history and its people, you cannot appreciate it because how could you appreciate something that evil? The only motive thing that you can do is slowly commit cultural and ethnic suicide. Don't have white kids. Don't say Merry Christmas. Don't be attracted to attractive women because that is oppression of ugly people. Don't move to places where people of your race are. That is white flight. Don't move to places where minorities are. That is gentrification. Don't adopt the practices of other cultures. That is cultural appropriation. Don't only live your own culture. That is white supremacy. Just shut up and die. Being fat is good. Not being a cis heterosexual is good. Is to be celebrated. Not being white, not being Christian, is good as well. Nothing that was once normal, that was human nature or Western culture can be celebrated, can be perpetuated since it's oppressive, right? Destructive, non-inclusive, and just backwards and evil. And even though not everybody on the left, not every leftist, progressive, or, liberal normie believes everything that I've listed, but they believe the overall sentiment, or they're guided by the ideology that is behind that. They're convinced to varying degrees that the fundamentally unfair nature of how the world, how human nature, how history and reality itself plays itself out needs to be amended by the intervention of large megastructures, like governments, big corporations, like social media platforms. The world is unfair, and people are not equal, and the authorities need to do something about it. This ought to be achieved by cultivating large social movements, activism, and the speech of the individual. The personal is political, the speech of one is contributing to the formation of social reality. Narrative is all there is to reality, culture, and it is the foundation of current power dynamics. It is the foundation to what we deem right, good, and beautiful. Narratives create the standards and norms we accept and live by, and what we see as real, as good, right, and beautiful can and should be managed by authorities and individuals in a personal realm to extinguish all inequities and unfair circumstances created by old understanding of reality. That is why conventional beauty standards are harmful, since it's not inclusive. That is why the myth of healthy at any size was created, because our understanding of health excludes obese people. That is why the gender binary was rejected, because it oppresses trans women. That is why they want to minimize or completely reject restrictions on abortion, because the reality of pregnancy is oppressing women. That is why they celebrate non-heteronormative people, because heteros being the norm oppresses non-hetero people. That is why they push for mass migration, because not letting them in is not inclusive, perpetuates inequities globally. That is why they push for racial quotas, push for interracial relationships, push for defunding the police, all to amend so-called historic injustice and the unequal power dynamics created by having a majority at all. The minority, the outsider, the foreigner, the one on the margin, the stranger, has become sacred, and the many, the majority, has become an enemy, the oppressor, by their ideology. They always say, normalize this, normalize that, while pathologizing what is normal. Men being masculine, women being feminine, people being attracted to attractive people of the opposing sex. They are sometimes even opposed to the idea of work and attribute the fact that we need to do something to put food on our table to provide shelter for ourselves, as oppressive aspects of capitalism. We have to understand that these people have been led to believe that aspects of reality, like biological sex, pregnancy, gender differences, IQ differences, differences in appearance, health, and place of birth, is oppressive and needs to be socially engineered away. Then, if we reach an inclusive, diverse, equal, intersectional utopia where everybody can be their true self and live without being discriminated by the fact that they do not represent a majority or are not represented by a majority. Those who are not on board with that or see problems with that vision are on the wrong side of history. Yes, history has an endpoint from which we can look back and see who was advocating for progress, good progress, that led us to a fair, just Garden of Eden. And the people on the left, they see that. They know what paradise looks like, and they know that you stand in the way of paradise. So it is not only morally justified, but necessary to get you out of the way, even using violence. You are a representation of what stands in the way of ultimate good. You're not just a political adversary, someone with a different opinion, but an avatar of evil. You're backwards, dumb, uneducated, hateful, a bigot, racist, homophobe, transphobe, xenophobe, sexist, misogynistic, etc. Even if you're not explicitly these things, or per definition, you are functionally all of these things. Systemically, you are racist. You are perpetuating a system of racism, homophobia, etc. by voicing your personal opinions, by not actively fighting the system, even by silence. That is why they hate centrists and moderates so much. What does it mean you are not sure if police should be defunded? They are over-policing, and that leads to the killing of black people. So I'm saying police should stop killing black people, and you are saying maybe it's more complicated. You are saying, how about we meet in the middle? How about a compromise? What does it mean you think the state shouldn't accept self-identification to determine if someone is trans or not? This will kill trans people. You having a different or not radical enough opinion, even if you're not hateful, will lead to non-inclusive or unequal or in any way harmful treatment of minorities who do not have the power to achieve change themselves. So you are systemically, indirectly, or stochastically oppressing these minorities by not advocating for whatever the left thinks will help them. So everybody who is not on my side is actually evil or functionally evil. There's no middle ground. It is important to understand that this means the Westerner, the white man, is irredeemable in their eyes. Whatever harm is done to him is just something he had coming. You should have been educated by now. You should know what harm you do by not being radical. Not being radical is your moral failure. These people have been radicalized to the point where civility and shared humanity does not exist. Common humanity is found in minorities, the identified underdog, not with the evil oppressor. When Saruman died in Lord of the Rings, you did not feel sorry for him. That is how they see your political leaders. A manifestation of evil, whose demise is ultimately a good for the world. When a random orc gets killed in Lord of the Rings, you do not feel bad. And that is the way they feel about the common white folk who opposes their ideas. The stupid MAGA supporter, the stupid right-winger, the bigot conservative, or whatever stereotype they have in mind that they have been taught by politicians and the media to associate with you. They do not see you as an individual in the same way you don't see an individual orc. They see an representative of the evil they are fighting. Most of political discourse is exactly that. Of course, this happens on the right as well. Even when family and friends state something you oppose politically, you stop treating them as people that you value and trust, that you appreciate and that you form deep connections with. Instead, you face them as bitter enemies. You actually face all the ideas and stereotypes that you have associated with whatever opinion they have stated. You stop talking person to person, and you start unloading all your stored up hatred for the dumb people who make those arguments, who also believe X and Y and who are evil and need to be put in their place because they make society a bad and unjust place. The person becomes a microcosm of the macrocosm of political discourse. The culture war seeps into the personal space and we become mere pawns in a political game. I don't see you, my friend, anymore, but a member of the red or blue team which I hate and who needs to be destroyed. Someone with those red and blue beliefs or ideas must be a horrible person or plainly stupid and falling for evil propaganda, and their stupidness is the result of their moral failure, and we need to forcefully and aggressively push against people like that, to re-educate them, or else them spreading mis- or disinformation will cause harm. That is why people cancel family members, stop talking to their friends, break up relationships. That is what causes distrust and destroys social cohesion. This widens the political divide. People don't talk to each other, or when they talk, they vilify the other and try to unload all their dissatisfaction, their hatred towards the group they associate you with. They want to shame you and dunk on you, because they cannot open their heart to people with other opinions. Even though this happens on the right as well, this is much more widespread on the left right now. But how can we blame them? They've been taught this by the education system, by academia, by the so-called experts and scientists, by mainstream politicians and the mainstream media, by large corporations, social media platforms, and Hollywood elites. They have grown up in a world where you are evil and they are good. And if all the authorities tell you that, why wouldn't you believe it? Trans women are women. Women get only paid 70 cents for every dollar a man makes. Trump praises neo-Nazis. You cannot be racist against white people. You can be fat and healthy. Beauty and morality is merely subjective. We live in a white supremacist, racist, sexist, homophobic country. Conservatives are evil. Your country and culture would be nothing without colonialism and slavery. Puberty blockers are safe and effective and reversible. If you don't transition children, they will kill themselves. Masks work. They don't work. Maybe two work. COVID coming from a lab is a crazy conspiracy theory. Migrants don't commit more crime. Whatever it is. If the party of science, scientists, experts, etc. all say it, it is only reasonable to believe it. So, you are the unreasonable one. Even if we would now agree with you and see there are problems with mass migration, or it turns out COVID shots weren't as safe and effective, or the medical industry shouldn't have done sex change experiments on children, we just went with science. So, we just went with what we could have known at the time. This is what they would say if they can no longer deny the truth. But I'm not sure if I'm not sure if it will ever come to this. These people have blood on their hands. The blood of children who got sterilized, who had body parts removed, whose bodies were altered through hormones. The blood of all the natives of Western countries that were hurt, murdered, or raped by people who come from violent and backwards cultures. The blood of all those who were attacked or killed by Antifa or other deranged leftists because they didn't have the right opinions. The blood of all the people that accepted being obese as healthy or good and normal, and who died or will die much earlier, who have health issues and will deny that it has anything to do with their weight. The blood of those who have isolated themselves because of a hedonistic and ultimately nihilistic destructive philosophy that rejects life's struggle to overcome adversity and achieve good by striving for virtue, ideals, what is good and beautiful. The blood of those women who will never have children, never have a happy family life, and end up with 3 cats and an alcohol problem. The blood of the countless men who took their own life because the future was female. They had no place in that future. Their struggles, their pain was not to be discussed. Men who slipped through the feminized education system and who were vilified by society as incels, losers, and never had an encouraging word in their whole life. The blood of those who were culturally pressured to become trans or polyamor, to be promiscuous, to reject their values, the beauty of their body, their health, their mental stability, who end up in therapy getting pumped up with antidepressants because they have climate anxiety or whatever destroys their mind. By rejecting the limitations that reality has put on us, they rejected what is good for us humans in the name of freedom. And that has led and will lead to a lot of suffering. They wanted the freedom to fuck around and never find out. Having the freedom to smoke weed every day and sleep with a different person every day is good. But advocating for that and actually taking that freedom, yes, actually doing it, leads to exactly the bad outcomes that were the reasons why we morally rejected these behaviors in the first place. It leads to a meaningless, unmaintainable life, especially if this lifestyle gets adopted on a large scale. Leftists with their ideology have blood on their hands, and the sheer volume of all the suffering they created is still unfathomable. as we come to understand that they only perpetuated what the authorities have told them, only believed what had been verified by the media and the experts, there's an interesting parallel that we can make. They are the Nazis. A common excuse after World War II was, we didn't know, we just followed rules. And if you think about it, that makes sense. The institutions tell you, these people are evil and doing all the bad stuff. And science says, yes, these people aren't human, the same way you are. And your philosophers say, life is a zero-sum game where the superior race has the duty to rule. Of course you can be a righteous person and do everything right while commit and support atrocities. So when it is just reasonable to follow what the authorities and institutions say, then being a Nazi was reasonable. They just happen to have the wrong ideas. But when you have the right ideas, then punching people, canceling them, killing them, forcing a vaccine on them, excommunicating them, whatever it is, all becomes justified. It's okay. Morality stopped being about what is right, but what end goal is attempted to be achieved, and the end justify the means. And people were made to believe that the situation is so dire, so dangerous, the world is going to end, society is about to collapse, groups of people are victimized to such a degree that not fighting against it with all means would be immoral. The world will end in 10 years because of climate change. Trans genocide is happening. Police are killing black people, trans kids are killing themselves. The situation is horrible because of the system. And we need to change that, and you stand in the way. You indirectly cause harm, so we can do harm to you, since one can do harm to those who harm others. We only stop you from harming others, and us harming you is the only way to do that. One can punch a Nazi, one can punch somebody who does not care for the well-being of others, and actively or indirectly hurt them. If the situation is extreme, we put our morals aside and say, okay, if there's a super deadly disease, if there's a zombie apocalypse, we probably should force people who are infected to stay inside the home and force people to take a vaccine, especially when we know the vaccine is safe. Sure. So we can sympathize with the people who have been led to believe that we live in this horrible world where extreme action is necessary and even personal speech must be controlled. But we have to also acknowledge that the ideology specifically pushes people to compromise all other virtues besides tolerance for minorities, not you, inclusivity for the fringe, not you, diversity without you, and equity for everybody else. It is one thing to think that the situation may be so dire, so dangerous, so serious that you can no longer stick to liberal principles and are forced to use illiberal means. But another thing to have the rejection of liberal principles and the use of illiberal means baked into the ideology. This is very important because, as Konstantin Kisin noticed, since Charlie Kirk's assassination, we haven't seen violent protest as we have seen after the death of George Floyd. In the last years, we have heard in the West a lot about the danger to our democracies, the danger to the safety of minorities, and all the terror that comes from the conservatives, the right wing, the so-called fascists and Nazis. We heard that we cannot speak about crime statistics, cannot reveal the race of criminals because it will rattle up the Nazis, it will empower the right wing, it will make people racist and dangerous. But we haven't seen that actually at the scale that we have grown used to seeing on the left. We have seen violent protests, riots, the formation of autonomous zones, college campuses completely taken over, buildings, people being attacked, police being attacked, public speaker being attacked, shops, banks, government buildings attacked. All of these phenomena organized or spontaneously assembled by left-leaning people, by woke people who have bought into the ideology. And we haven't seen that at the same level on the right and center. Now, one could say, well, of course the right would not attack the institutions, wouldn't smash in windows of shops and banks. The right is for maintaining the status quo. They are for the system, so right-wing terror wouldn't express itself in the same way. But to that I would say, the right, even though it identified the media as the enemy of the people, even though they talked a lot about fake news, smear merchants, or Lügenpresse in Germany, still we haven't seen lots of terror and harm directed towards the media. The right has identified a lot of problems with left-leaning institutions, the media, academia, education, the medical facilities, but how many abortion centers, how many trans clinics, how many college campuses, how many media companies have been attacked by right-wing lunatics? And how many everyday right-wingers condone such attacks or take part in them? It is just not baked into their philosophy as it is in the left's. A moderate right-winger, until now, was not as comfortable with violence and uncivil and, strangely enough, illiberal tactics as the so-called liberals themselves. Self-proclaimed liberals were fine shutting down people, cancelling them, sometimes even doxing them, destroying their lives, punching them, or instead of doing it themselves, they were fine activating Antifa and other bad actors to execute such heinous acts. It is not cancel culture, it is accountability culture. The right has been more liberal than the liberals themselves, who largely became progressives. They became woke, which means they woke up to the realization that liberal means cannot address successfully historic injustice and inequities between groups, and illiberal methods need to be used. Besides all the violence and cancel culture, another good example are quotas. For them, we need racial quotas. We need more representation of minorities in the government, at work, in shows and movies, on college campus, and if that means that we discriminate against the white person, then that is okay, since past discrimination can only be remedied by present and future discrimination. Somehow, we need to give these people a leg up, and we cannot do it by liberal means. Similarly, we need to include trans women, and if that means that a real woman is not able to participate in a sports event, or none of the participating women win, then that is a price that we have to pay to help the poor trans person who has less privilege as the woman at the sports event. Sacrificing the freedom and the rights of those who are perceived as having more privilege is just. It just equals it out. Woke also means to have an intersectional view of people and seeing them in a power dynamic. Like Marxists see an oppressor versus oppressed dynamic between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, the woke progressive see that oppressor versus oppressed dynamic, not only in the economic sphere, they don't just see that dynamic play out between classes, but races, ethnicities, cultures, religions, sex or gender, able-bodied and disabled, thin and fat bodies, different sexualities, different levels of attractiveness, etc. In Western societies, they mostly define what is the dominant, majority culture, religion, ethnicity, or race, what is the sexual norm, so heterosexuality, and what are commonly accepted norms and standards as oppression, and the tools of oppression, where everything that is not the norm, that is fringe, a minority, an hypothetical alternative sex or gender, an alternative beauty standard, obese people, gay people, queer people, or whatever is not the norm, not the standard, as the oppressed, or the revolutionary, brave, and praiseworthy society-transforming force. That is why queerness is political. That is why the LGBT flag has black and brown, and sometimes even the BLM fist on it, because it is the symbol under which all the minorities, all the fringe identities, unify against the oppressor. They form an identity in opposition to the norm. Inclusion means including them for their benefit at your cost. Diversity means less of the majority, less of you. Equity means disproportionate representation for identity groups so that they have the same representation as the majority, who in a democracy under liberalism should logically have more representation. In a white country, there would naturally be more white people represented in the government than other races. But this is not about logic, although it follows a logic. As we have discussed earlier, whatever white people possess is stolen anyway. So if white people get disadvantaged, if proportionally speaking they get less representation or get actively discriminated against to reach quotas, then that is just a necessary step to lower the success of whites and help other races. So they one day will reach the same level of success. An oppressor versus oppressed power dynamic applied to identity groups, the sanctification of the minority and the vilification of the majority, the celebration of the divergence, the exceptions, the fringe, and the rejection of the norm, the standard, the rejection of liberal principles, all of that combined with an utopian goal of an intersectional paradise where diversity, equity, and inclusion are the guiding principles, define the ideology that is often described as progressive or woke. And it's exactly this cocktail of thought that fuel their desire for violent revolution, for burning down buildings, for taking over campuses, for canceling people, holding them accountable, as they say. It is very ironic. Even though the left had control over the media, control over the government, control over social media, control over the education system, control over the messaging of large corporations and corporate culture, what was deemed acceptable to publicly believe and to state at work in shows and events, and even in positions of power. Even though through academia they controlled institutions of science, they decided what can be researched, what theories were in line with left-wing orthodoxy, what would be funded, what papers would be published, and so on. Still, even though they had all this control, they still saw themselves as the revolution, as the underdog who is fighting the man and are justified in using radical means. All the while, the right and the center largely tried to be civil and adhere to liberal ideals, free speech and civil discourse. Another interesting thing, there's an especially corrosive aspect of the value system that undermines all other values, which is the valuing of tolerance above everything else. Tolerance means being able to take violations of your boundaries, your rights, your values, your morals, and ethics to a certain degree. To accept these violations until they cross a line. Tolerance is the amount one can go after they cross your boundary until it becomes too much for you. Having tolerance as your highest value, having your level of tolerance define your moral character, your level of goodness, means that all other virtues, honesty, loyalty, love, empathy, reason, bravery, wisdom, whatever it is, can be compromised for tolerance. The nature of having a highest principle or highest value always means that all the other values have to serve the highest and have to align with it. Beyond self-preservation, which is the highest value for many, love and connection, maybe pride or pleasure, is what is most important to the majority of people. But everything that comes after that, be it bravery or honesty, is negligible. I would suggest that for those who value tolerance, this effect is even stronger, since the nature of tolerance is the compromise and the accepted negligence of whatever oneself feels or wants. Especially when we look at a society or a group of people that embrace tolerance and inclusivity and diversity as their core principles. All of their norms, standards, values, their culture, whatever is part of their identity can be undermined and sacrificed in the name of tolerance. Because it is more important to tolerate the cultural practices of Muslims, even if they are illiberal, than having your own culture, saying Merry Christmas and maybe offending some hypothetical Muslim and not being inclusive enough. It is as if our society was fed with an ideology perfectly designed to destroy Western civilization or any civilization. If this was designed or just ideas that sprung up in academia and slowly infected our nations to the point where there is no need for some top-down orchestration, but rather people guided by their ideology spontaneously organize themselves and act in unison, the question now arises, what should the right and the center do? Now that we understand they believe what they say, they believe you are evil and they believe they can do you no wrong because of it, what should we do? They have become the thing they think they are fighting against. Yes, because they thought they were fighting the Nazis, they actually became the Nazis. The ones who are the most evil are always those who think they are the good ones fighting evil. Whatever they accused you of doing, they did. To stop you. Whether they tried to prevent you doing, they did. Be it stochastic terrorism, real terrorism, framing the news, disinformation, misinformation, using fake science, alternative facts, being anti-science, harming men and women through ideas about gender and sex, harming kids, fueling racial tensions, stoking racial hatred, causing polarization, creating echo chambers, causing political violence, using speech to harm, being authoritarian, forcing morals onto others, conspiring against a group of people and actively disadvantaging them on the basis of immutable characters, being sexist, being racist. They did all these things, but in the name of preventing you from doing it. They did it or participated in it, pitching left-wing media narratives and carrying the water for radicals, all the while screaming at you for being fascist, evil, or stupid. The idea that evil is justified against a group because they are identified as evil, that empathy should be selective and granted to you based on group identity, is what James Lindsay described as a seed of genocide, which he saw hidden in the left's ideology. And after Charlie Kirk's blood was spilled, this seed has sprouted. Now the seedling does not need to grow to a full tree, but conservatives, centrist, normal people have to understand that these are no longer just kids on college campus. They are no longer just the weird mainstream media, no longer just the Democratic Party or the Labour Party or whatever it is in your country. They are no longer just radicals. What we are facing are no longer fringe ideas or just extreme political theories that they themselves don't really believe in. We are facing the Nazis of our time, and unlike what happened in Germany after World War II, there will be no America that can free our countries from them, that can take over the education system and the media and re-educate the population and show them how they were wrong and to what atrocities their ideology led to. Germany could change so quickly because the Germans were forced to see what they have done, but who will force the left to see what they have done? The left-wing media? The left-wing education system? Even if conservatives win every election from now on, the amount of left-leaning people who bought into the woke narrative is too large, especially in the education system, in academia and the media. Woke is not dead, and won't be for a long time. Now, since we're asking what to do, it might be tempting to say, well, they are the Nazis of our time, so we have to use radical, illiberal means to fight them, right? And this leads us into a weird position where we have to acknowledge that the left was right to some degree in some instances. When the right criticized the left's identity politics, they said, well, since America, the West, is white supremacist and minorities are getting targeted by white people, by police, etc., they are forced to unify using the same identifier you white supremacists use to discriminate against them. So, you are seeing me as an immigrant or black person and you are treating me and other immigrants or blacks bad, then I and other people like me have to unify and support each other based on our race and fight for our rights as a group. Now, this is what people like James Lindsay criticize about the right, because a lot of people on the right woke up to the fact that they have to unify based on their race to advocate for their rights and to protect them from racial targeting. To keep on attempting to just be a good liberal individualist and fight in the marketplace of ideas and attempting to vote yourself out of the culture war by being shut down, being censored online, being misrepresented and lied about in the media and so on, seems unfeasible. They have been attacked and vilified on the basis of their skin color, and their societies have been transformed beyond recognition. Their culture has been destroyed, and since they never really unified based on their shared characteristics, because they adhered to liberal individualism, they never fought collectively for their culture. White people had been trained not to see themselves as part of a white collective. This made them reject the duty as majority define and enforce the culture and ethics of the dominant culture. So, they realize the left was right. If you are being in the situation they thought they were, or claimed they were, then maybe fighting as they fought is justified. It is just that they weren't oppressed, they weren't facing the Nazis, but we do. They got somehow misled into believing we are evil, which is why they have become evil, and now we just, we must fight them, or else them victimizing us will never stop. That is the conclusion many are coming to right now. And it is difficult to say anything against it, and just calling them woke right idiots is not cutting it. It is missing the point. White people, Western majorities, need to do something as a collective effort. They need to unify. Maybe not based on race and lineage, but on culture. They need to develop a shared identity based on something, and it better be culture, because that is, to use a dirty word, inclusive enough while being exclusive enough. It discriminates based on values and welcomes everyone who aligns with defined values. In any case, the majority has a duty to come forth and determine what the standards and the norms are. Otherwise, it will be chaos. As we have seen now in our countries and seen all over the world, if there is no one leading, all the small groups will fight for supremacy. Without core principles, without a core identity, no nation, no people can sustain through time. So, what should we do? Should we be consumed by hate and vengeance, take an eye for an eye, or make them pay sevenfold? Should we drink from the well they poisoned with hatred and lash out in self-righteous anger? No. We shall not become like demons and let the demonic win. Who will win if we become like them, if not them? If we overreact, they will say, see how hypocritical they are, see they have no principles, see they never believed in free speech. They will point to your aggression, even your self-defense, and say, look, there are the Nazis we were talking about all the time. Many of you are already turning in that direction. They pushed you into finally agreeing. Yes, I am racist. Yes, I am transphobic. And by you accepting that label, they lost all the power they had over you before by threatening to label you that way if you disagree, if you don't comply. Now, you are breaking every taboo, making every joke, questioning every narrative, race in IQ, crime statistics, Jews, Muslims, women, and embracing everything that you were taught to reject. Like pride in your group identity, pride in your country, pride in your culture, celebrating your heritage and declaring it as superior. This feels freeing, to finally unapologetically reject the left's framing, finally breaking the chains of emotional blackmailing, shaming and gaslighting that you've endured for your whole life. And it is freeing, and it opens up the Overton window specifically for one group of people who are treated as second-class citizens in the public discourse, where they couldn't have opinions that others held, they couldn't say words that others said, they weren't allowed to have certain dispositions while other groups of people could have them. They couldn't feel pride, appreciation for their people, their cultures, they couldn't speak about minorities and their cultures, couldn't even make the sound nigger, even in a neutral context. But now, with the challenging of every taboo and the rejection of any label, by simply saying, okay, then I am that. Now watch how bad I can be. You have no power over me, faggot. Suddenly, what can be said and what cannot be said is completely being re-evaluated, and that would not have been able without that power move. The time of constant apologizing, walking on eggshells, trying not to say a wrong word, constantly explaining and trying to give context and correct qualifiers, just to appease people who want to misunderstand you and who will intentionally misunderstand you so they can exert power over you while claiming moral superiority. That time is over. It is done. When Elon Musk took over Twitter and Trump won and social media stopped censoring the right and the center, people couldn't be silenced into compliance anymore. They realized they weren't the minority anymore. They realized they had the majority on their side, and it was time to say what they thought, and people used that opportunity to make up for lost time and release all the unexpressed frustrations with issues like immigration, crime coming from minorities, degenerate cultural practices, gender relations, and so on. All the hate they had received for being white, being Christian, being Western, being male, all of that boiled over when finally the lid was lifted and people could release their emotions and talk more freely. This is necessary to end white guilt, white shame, to heal the broken soul of the white majority that is plagued by self-hatred and a perceived white inferiority. So finally, white people's tendency for self-erasure can be stopped. You weren't allowed to say, it is okay to be white. You were shamed if you did, and that shame kept many from saying, of even feeling that it was okay. It is the stripping off of that shame that initiates the healing of the collective unconscious of whites, which allows them to finally see good in themselves and celebrate that good. This opens up the possibility to promote that which is good in Western culture, in the culture of the majority, without the ability to say, this is something about us that is good, without the ability to celebrate it and promote it, there is no leading principle, no leading morality, no guiding principle, and therefore nothing to integrate into, nothing to adapt to for minorities. There is no standard to which they are held to. The majority can appreciate itself again without fearing the label of some kind of supremacist or xenophobe. When they can proudly set a standard and set norms, they can create social cohesion, stability, and unity. But here lies the danger. Whatever the standard is the majority sets will become the standard for everyone. However the right and center now decides to act will decide the rules of discourse, the code of conduct. If we cannot bounce back from the excessive taboo breaking from the right now, people will actually become radically racist and authoritarian, and more will turn to violence. This will fuel the left and strengthen their narrative, which will make them, even though they were wrong the past whatever years, even more sure of themselves, even more radical, and even more attractive for liberals who carried water for them all this time and do not want to admit they were wrong. It will be too complex to explain to them, well, back then the right wasn't this extreme and you all were wrong, but yeah, now after you radicalize them, they are actually Nazis. But well, you started it and you need to become less radical, even though you know there are actually Nazis here now. At that point, we will not be able to stop further radicalization on both sides, and even the normies on both sides will be torn apart and will feel forced to align with the radicals on their side. As we have already seen with liberals who sympathized with radicals after Trump won, and as we can see right now happening with conservatives who feel they have to become a radical after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. So, we need to come to our senses. We need to focus on our virtues again. Westerners and those who take on the heritage of Western civilization need to carry the torch of tradition, to shine the light of wisdom on the ruins of progress and rebuild that which has been brought down in the absence of its light and in the presence of darkness. The brightness of a new day shall cut through the night, casting away all the shadows of the past. And I know we cannot just take what the ideological captured do to us. We cannot just move on and act as if nothing ever happened. We have to stand tall in the face of this evil, but we shall not be tempted by that evil to retaliate evil with evil, for we will become evil and the evil will win. Yes, we cannot ignore culture decline, the loss of social cohesion, crime and degeneracy anymore. We cannot show endless mercy to others while judging ourselves endlessly. We have to counterbalance mercy with justice and judge others accordingly. But we shall not lose all mercy for others and enter into cruelty. Now that we have stripped us from shame, we still need to judge us according to virtue. No, now is not the time to become as deranged and demonic as our fallen brothers and sisters. Now is finally the time to become superior and to take on the responsibility to lead in virtue as in politics. We shall become greater, stronger and wiser than ever before. May our strength and righteousness light the way out of this darkness that the benighted have brought upon our civilization. The strong need to take the throne again, and the tyranny of the weak shall end. As those great men who came before us, whose goodness inspired us, whose loss enraged us, exactly because we recognized the value in their adherence to the good, we valued them as a living representation of the good. May we also become a representation of the good, just like them. Let us not ask, what good did it bring them? But see the good in us that they inspired and recognize the good that they brought to the world. Let us take on the torch they passed down to us and live the light they ignite in us, that their values did not die with them, but live on eternally. May the virtue of wisdom, mercy and justice guide us in the service of that which is good, true and beautiful. And may our love for the good be greater than our hatred for the bad. God bless us all.